Halito Chimachukma, this is Chief Steve coming at y'all with another episode of True Story. Today I have a pretty interesting book for you guys. This was actually brought to my attention by my beautiful chiefess, my wife, who does a lot of research on her own, and sometimes decides to bring me in on the cut. So this is one of hers that she's graciously allowed me to do a presentation on. So I just want to give a shout out to her. This is a good one right here. This is called The Indian Races of North and South America, comprising an account of the principal Aboriginal races, a description of their national customs, mythology, and religious ceremonies, the history of their most powerful tribes and of their most celebrated chiefs and warriors, their intercourse and wars with the European settlers, and a great variety of anecdote and description illustrative of personal and national character. This is by Charles DeWolf Brownell, born 1822 through 1909, publication date 1864. Once again, as you can see on the top there, archive.org is the source. I always list my source. So there you go. This is 100% true story. Alrighty. So we're going to start on page 21, chapter 1, page 21 here. Go down to the second paragraph. It's when things get real good. We're going to read this all the way out through, to the end of the chapter. And this is going to be a multi-series here. It's going to be a bit of a series because this is a really good book. We're going to get deep into it. But we're going to start as close to the beginning as possible, and then we're going to, basically fill in the gaps as we go. So here we go. A knowledge of the habits and peculiarities of the Indians can be acquired in the most pleasing manner by the perusal of their history, interspersed as it is with the quaint descriptions of old chroniclers, who wrote when the events and scenes were vividly impressed upon their minds, and before modern refinements had done away with that directness of expression which marks their narratives. So this is supposed to be an accord of our characteristics, attributes, and everything that before the narrative was really pushed upon our people. This is of past age, according to them, of how we got down originally. Okay? Such details make, moreover, a far stronger impression upon the memory that can be affected by a series of dry generalities. We shall therefore refer the reader to the historical portion of this work for most of the information which we shall attempt to convey. In this and in the ensuing chapter, we may frequently speak of usages and characteristics as belonging to a past age, okay, which are still to be observed among the more remote Western tribes. The difficulty of always drawing the distinction in a series of such general remarks as are here submitted must form our excuse for such seeming anachronisms. I'm always dealing with that word there. I'm getting it down though. Anachronisms. Okay. We notice in the Indian a remarkable gravity and innate dignity, which leads him to avoid with the most scrupulous care all involuntary or impulsive expression of his feelings. So he says that we as Indians are not too emotional. We're not that impulsive as far as emotion back in this time. This is not confined to the occasions upon which he calls forth his powers of endurance and suffering, the most cruel torments, with apparent insensibility, or even with exultation, but enters into all the acts of his daily life. So, in other words, he doesn't feel the struggle, or he doesn't let anybody know that he's feeling the struggle. He just goes on with his daily routine, does what he does, make sure this stuff gets done. I can see that, can you? We kind of have those ways today. He betrays no unseemly curiosity or impatience under circumstances that would naturally excite both in the highest degree. So, in other words, he keeps a cool head. Has he been long absent from home on a warpath or on a visit to cities of the whites? Has he learned some great and threatening danger, or has the intelligence reached him of the death of those whom he most values? His conduct and method of communicating his adventures or his information are governed by the same deliberation and immobility. So, no matter what it is, what they're going through, how it's brought to them, we still move and stand on business. We still take care of what needs to be done. And yeah, we move on. And, this is just like you said, these are just dry generalities here. Not every Indian is the same, obviously. Not every American Indian deals with things the same way. This is just their observation from the chosen few that they decided to observe. Returning half famished from an unsuccessful hunt, he enters his wigwam and sits down unquestioned, showing no symptoms of impatience for food. His wife prepares his refreshments, and after smoking his pipe and satisfying his hunger, he volunteers an account of his experience. Okay. We can pause for the cause, and I'll show you guys an image that I kind of generated from AI to simulate what that could have possibly looked like back in the day. Keeping in accord when this was wrote. All right, y'all, we're here. So this is just a general idea of what that would have looked like. Coming in after a long day, the hunt wasn't too good or whatever. Comes down, smokes his pipe. His wife and his kids come, greet him. Hey, Pop, how was your day? Hey, darling, not looking too well or whatever, And actually, it says that they wouldn't even question them. They just, know what the get down is. I mean, if you out for a hunt, usually when you out for a hunt and you come back, you bringing back some, some game. You bringing back some food. So you see he's coming back empty-handed. He ain't really, probably got a down look on his face or, just about business. So they already knew what the get down was. They went ahead and got him some meat, got him some corn, some squash, some bread. Got his drink on the side there in that vase. And, they tended to him. So when he done, going through his emotion processing and everything, puts his pipe down and he begins to expel what he's gone through for that day, So one thing that he mentioned is that our people are not, so emotionally driven to where we're impatient or we're, just being impulsive emotionally. And that goes for our men and our women, and even our children. We're taught the discipline of, hey, Pop come in, doesn't look like he had too big of a day or too good of a day. Don't pressure him or nothing like that. Don't try to, get anything out of him or something. Just let him go through his emotions. Let him get what he needs out. and let's just be there for them. So this is just a general idea as to how that would have went down. So let's get on back to the book here. Pause for the cause one more time. We're going to get into it. Alrighty. It says Caitlin gives a striking description of the meeting between a chief named Wenjunjun, who had just returned from an embassy to Washington and his family. He landed from the steamer at his home in the far west, so he came off the train with complete suit and militaire, a colonel's uniform of blue, presented to him by the President of the United States, with a beaver hat and feather, with epaulets of gold, with sash and belt, and broad sword, with high-heeled boots, with a keg of whiskey under his arm, and a blue umbrella in his hand. So, homie was decked out. He was well respected by the government. He put in work, and he was, as a chief, and he was being recognized. So he came in back from that long journey he had from the East Coast back to the West. It says, in this plight and metamorphose, he took his position on the bank amongst his friends. So he sat on the bank of a river, basically amongst his friends, as his wife and other relations. So with his people, not one of whom exhibited for an half hour or more the least symptoms of recognition, although they knew well who was before them. So they was just going about their business, doing their thing. Nobody stopped and was like, he's back, But it's all good, because it says the conduct of the chief was of the same character. But half an hour afterwards, a gradual but cold and exceedingly formal recognition began to take place, after which all went on as if he had never been absent. So that's one thing about our people. If you know that, like I said, not every Indian is the same, of course. But with our people, for the most part, you know how we go. We can, rather be family members or friends or something, we can not see each other for a long time. And it can even be like years, decades for some of us and our homies. But once we get back together and we say we give formal recognition, you know what I mean? Like, he makes it seem so dry. But, that formal recognition can be a, handshake, hug, dap it up, talk with each other, and just that warm greeting that we give each other. After that's taken place, he says everything just went on as if he's never been absent. And that's usually how we go. That's how we do things. Like, when we meet each other, we get up, we greet each other, and then we go on about our business like they ain't never left. Like, we just pick up from where we left off. Rather it be from years or decades ago or days. Don't matter. That's just how connected we are. So don't look at it as a bad thing or making it seem like, they just no emotion and, they don't have any kind of social skills or recognition of camaraderie. It's nothing like that. We cool with it. That's what I'm getting from this book. We ain't all, happy go lucky. We ain't like a whole bunch of little leaping dogs, happy to see somebody come home, somebody hit the door. We just fall all over ourselves. And, even for the chief, it's just like, hey, you back. What's up? We missed you, of course. We appreciate you. And let's get him back in the mix, like nothing, he ain't never left. I'm sure he has some cool stories and stuff to tell and everything of that nature. For the most part, they just continue on like he never left because that's how cohesive they are. You know what I mean? So, real ones know. They know what's going on with it. So, they look at it as strange, though. This is what he says. It says, this strange demeanor does not by any means result from real indifference, but from the supposed propriety of suppressing any outbreak of emotion. So he thinks like we purposely don't show emotion or try not to get him over emotional, which is not even the case. It's just our nature. We cool with it, and it's a difference for today as well because some of us is really in our feelings about a lot of stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Says, no doubt all the parties to the scene above described were in a state of the greatest curiosity and excitement. See? And the family doubtless felt the most exuberant joy at the reunion, but custom, or their ideas of good taste, prohibited the exhibition of a scene. So they didn't really want to cause a scene. And plus, on top of that, you got foreigners obviously recording and watching them interact with each other. So it's kind of like, you don't want to show too much in front of them. Sure, when they left and everything like that, stuff really got lit, but, I wasn't there to see it. Says those who are best acquainted with the character of the Indians agree that with them the ties of family affection are exceedingly strong and enduring. You see there? We still care about family. It's not that we completely cold in emotion or nothing like that. We care about each other. So the most touching descriptions are given of the manner in which they mourn for the dead and of the tender and faithful remembrance of lost relatives that no length of time seems to obliterate. Always care about our people. We always remember our people. We hold our ancestors in high regard. That's what we do. Carver says, I can assert that notwithstanding the apparent indifference with which an Indian meets his wife and children after a long absence, an indifference proceeding rather from custom than insensibility, he is not unmindful of the claims either of connubial or parental tenderness. So we got that emotion. That emotion is there. It's just, I think the formalness kind of comes more so from us knowing that we know that they're watching us. You know what I mean? And we didn't want to give them too much to play on because we didn't know what they was about. Because if you really understand and you read through this, you can kind of discern with your inner self what's really going on. You got to keep in mind what's happening right now. Got foreigners coming in. They just coming in reading, writing books and stuff, and they looking at you and they writing shit down. You don't know what's really going on, what's up with all that. So it's like, hey, let's keep it cool. Let's do what we gotta do. Behind closed doors, we can, get into some deeper stuff. But yeah, I'm that's the vibe that I'm picking up from it personally. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm usually not wrong about these things. The same author who had witnessed the most bloody and savage scenes of Indian warfare and who was familiar with the cruelties and unrelenting spirit of revenge peculiar to the race candidly bears witness to their good qualities. Says, no people, he says, can be more hospitable, kind, and free. The honor of their tribe and the welfare of their nation is the first and most predominant emotion of their hearts, and from hence proceed in a great measure all their virtues and their vices. No selfish views ever influence their advice or obstruct their consultations. They are at once guided by passions and appetites, which they hold in common with the fiercest beasts that inhabit their woods, and are possessed of virtues which do honor to human nature. So I mean, that basically describes it in a nutshell. We take care of ourselves, we take care of each other, we care about ours, you know, even in times of war, we get, that passion is high. We take care of business and everything, but it's always family first. It's always our people. Our people come first, and it's kind of a selflessness in it. You can see that in our people now. Why a lot of us, especially men, why do we do the things that we do? We do it for our people. We do it for our family. It's like I'm doing what I'm doing right here, right now. I mean, you don't see me. I mean, yeah, you see me get a little passionate about these things sometimes, but I'm not sitting here raging and screaming and hollering and, crying and shit. I mean, it gets emotional, but at the same time, I keep my head, I keep my coolness, and I know that I'm doing this not just for me, I'm doing it for all of you. I'm doing it for my family, my wife, my kids, and for the future generations. When you know that you have a higher purpose, that selflessness becomes second nature, you know, and it's not a complete, you know, it's not a complete neglect of self, but it's more so of, hey, it benefits me to do for my people. And that's how we've always operated. All right, going forward, the Indians are naturally taciturn, but fond of set speeches. Their oratory is of no mean order and is distinguished for a pythiness, a quaintness, and occasionally a vein of dry sarcasm, which have never been surpassed. In other words, we're kind of like we're not. I guess the best way you can say this is we're very clear with our words. We're very clear and concise with our words. We're not, you know, we don't talk no more than what we need, how much we need to talk, and we get the point across. Sometimes with a bit of sarcasm involved, but it says we have specimens, go their language, of some of their orations upon great occasions, which are models of stirring eloquence, adorned with metaphors and similes, which breathe the true spirit of poetry. So we good with words. The most pleasing traits in the character of these strange people are their reverence for age, their affection for their children, their high notions of honor, and their keen sense of justice. All right? The great stigma upon the whole race is their deliberate and systemic cruelty in the treatment of captives. Yeah. So it says, uh, basically, we care about our people, but when it comes to wartime, when it comes to getting captives and having prisoners of war, we emotionalists, like we kind of, we treat them as such. So if we go into war with these folks and, they've done something to become a prisoner, a captive, we ain't showing no kind of politeness to them. All right? So that's what the great stigma is. So says it is hard to account for this, but it really appears upon investigation to be rather a national custom, gradually reaching a climax, than to have arisen from any innate love of inflicting pain. Okay? It's custom. This is something that we do. It's not that we like being sadistic or we like, just inflicting pain on people. It's something that we feel that needs to get done. Whatever that cruelty was that was, happening, that they thought that was cruel. You gotta imagine what was being done that was cruel to them in order for them to decide, hey, it's time to go to war and it's time to capture these people and give them a taste of their medicine. Okay? Gotta keep that in mind. It is perfectly certain that if the children of the most enlightened nation on earth should be brought up in occasional familiarity with scenes like those witnessed at the execution of a prisoner by the American savages, well, now we savages, they would experience no horror at the sight. We need no seek farther than the history of religious and political persecutions in Europe. Damn, so they comparing comparing us to them as far as how we treat, and it says, or the cruelties practiced on reputed witches in our own country to satisfy us that the character of the Indians will suffer little by comparison with that of their contemporaries of our own race. So they saying we can get just as nitty gritty as they do. Uh, I've seen some. I've personally seen some accounts of European torture, as far as like book wise, and I don't know. I don't think we on that same level. Some of them, especially in religious groups, they be on some other stuff. But according to them, they saying that you could fail, no fail comparison. Apparently, among some of those nations, which included an extensive confederacy, where a system of government had become settled by usage, and the authority of the chief had been strengthened by long submission to him and his predecessors, an arbitrary monarchy seems to have prevailed. But among the smaller tribes, the authority of the chief was rather advisory than absolute. There was generally a king who held hereditary office and exercised the powers of a civil governor by virtue of his descent. While to lead, while to lead the warriors in battle, the bravest, most devoted, or I don't know, this is kind of like blurred out a little bit, and sagacious of the tribe was elected. Okay, so basically the one that they felt was worthy was elected. These two chief offices were not unfrequently united in the same person. So it usually be two people. It's not unfrequently united within the same person. So you have, you got your war chief and you got your, your grand chief, your big chief. And then it says, when the lawful sachem from a spirit of emulation or from natural advantages showed himself worthy of the position. Okay? And it says all matters of national interest were discussed at a solemn council consisting of the principal men of the tribe, and at which great decorum and formality were observed. As the debate proceeded, the whole conclave, whenever a remark, I believe, from the orator speaking excited the approbation, would give expression to their approval by a guttural ejaculation, probably ejaculation, but I don't know. The language is pretty weird in there, but basically all they're saying is among smaller tribes, you had usually one chief that gave, the rule, and then they did with it through that guideline, however they did it. And then with the bigger ones, they had a council, and they usually had a war chief, they had a grand chief or big chief, and then they'll sit amongst themselves in a council, and whatever came, to the idea, if they agreed on it all, they'll give a guttural, like a high, here, or, a whole, whatever that they feel that, they agree on that, on something, and then basically the punishment or the execution or whatever will go be brought forward, so. But yeah, it's usually a council of men, and I know I've spoken in prior videos about the female rulership of some nations. That's why I said not every Indian is the same. Not every tribe is, the same. You have different tribes and different vibes for those tribes. And for the most part, it wasn't matriarchy going on, out here. But when it came to war, and passing judgment, a lot of that was done by the men, by a council of men, which they called phatres. And phatres is nothing more than like a brotherhood or a priesthood of sorts. It was usually all men, your elders, and then, the warriors of the, and your chiefs and things. So I said different tribes have different vibes. It's really interesting to see, the richness of and variety of our people. So that's pretty cool. All right. It says all matters of national interest were discussed at a solemn council consisting of the principal men of the tribe, and at which great discern. Okay, I read this already, right? Great decorum and formality were observed. All right, the guttural ejaculation. All right, we got over that. Okay, next paragraph. A natural instinct of retributive justice ordained that the crime of murder should be punished by the hand of the deceased person's nearest relative. So that was a law back then. That was tribal law for, these chosen tribes, was that if somebody was murdered, then the family of that murdered person will basically give the punishment to the person who, you know, who basically murdered that person. So, an interesting incident connected with this custom is told in a notice of the public life of the Honorable Pierre A. Ross of Louisiana, given in the United States Law magazine for March 1852. It says here, he is here said to have been the first to suggest the propriety of interference in these matters on the part of the state courts. In a drunken fray, an Indian had been accidentally killed. The relatives of the deceased were absent at the time, but they soon heard of his death and came from the Indian Territory to exact blood for blood from the homicide. He was advised to flee, but would not, and in blind submission to the law of the red man, agreed to deliver himself on a certain day to be shot. So he already knew what time it was. The court was then sitting, and Mr. Ross proposed to the presiding judge to prevent the horrid sacrifice by giving the victim a fair trial by jury, many members of which were known and represented by the relatives of the deceased, and impressing upon the latter the necessity of abiding by the verdict, whatever it might be. This was done, and everything was conducted with due form and solemnity. The Indian witnesses gave the most satisfactory answers when questioned as to their ideas of the obligation of an oath, and after a full hearing, the defendant was acquitted. The decision was translated to the complainants, and they were told that to kill the prisoner would now be murder and would subject them to the penalties of that crime. Okay? Says Mr. Ross then rose and stated to the court that the prosecutors had left their hunting ground to come and avenge the death of their relative, as it was their duty to do. That justice had been done to the accused, but that was not sufficient. Justice must also be done to the other side. They must be indemnified for the inconvenience they had been put to and the loss they had sustained. And as the coffers of the treasury would not unlock at the bidding of his honor, he moved that the bar, jury, and bystanders contribute a sufficient amount to satisfy them. So basically, with all this being done, they left their hunting grounds. They wanted to avenge their relative's death. They wouldn't let them kill him. So basically, they acquitted the person, and with that being done, justice being served on that note, they were still feeling that they had an injustice because they needed that land back, or they needed some kind of, compensation for the land that they gave up. Because keep in mind what time it is. They see vacant land, they're going to move on that, especially if it's Indian land. They left out of Indian territory to go take care of this matter in Louisiana. And after they left, their land was basically up for grabs. And so they had to basically get compensated for that. And for some reason, the Treasury didn't want to unlock their coffers. They didn't want to pay the family. So he encouraged everybody that was there to help chip in. So that was cool. It says this was done as soon as proposed, and the prosecutors declared themselves satisfied. So that's a good thing. That just means, like, outside of the warring and stuff and having whatever they want to call less emotion or cruelty or whatever they want to call it, we still made sure that our people were taken care of. We knew how to put emotions aside. That's the most important thing that you need to know about this whole thing, is they had enough sensibility back then, and we still do now if we practice it, to put emotion aside and make sure that business is taken care of for everybody, putting our families and putting the purpose out there first, putting the purpose first, making the purpose priority rather than our own personal feelings. You know what I mean? Okay, the institution of marriage among the American Indians is by no means so restrictive a system as that adopted by enlightened nations. It is for the most enlightened nation, right? It is for the most part dissoluble at the pleasure of the parties, and polygamy is extensively practiced. So there were multiple wives involved in certain tribes. You did have more than one wife. As with other barbarous nations, goes that language, the woman is compelled to undergo the drudgery of daily labor, while her lord and master lounges indolently about the village. It sounds so terrible. Except at times when his energies are called forth for hunting or war. And it wasn't that bad. This is how they're making it. Like, we just did not do nothing. Men just didn't do nothing but hunt and go to war, and just left the woman to do everything. It wasn't. Try to do that now. This is all I gotta say. Just try to do that now. It don't go like that. I mean, men work. We take care of we do what we need to do. It was a balance. It was still a balance there, but from where you gotta take into consideration, these are foreigners looking from the outside in. So they only observing and writing down what they see and how they interpret it. So ladies, don't take this personally. Men, don't take this personally either, because I am not responsible or reliable for whatever you try to do at home that you have no business doing. All right. It says, when once engaged in these pursuits, his fixedness of purpose and the readiness with which he will undergo the extremes of toil, exposure, hunger, and privation is marvelous. So it's basically saying that we don't really exert too much energy outside of hunting and going to war. So when it's time to hunt and when it's time to go to war, when it's time to go to work, basically, we put it all on the line. Like I said, no emotions attached, keeping the family first, keeping the tribe first in our minds, and keeping the purpose as a priority. We make sure that we get shit done by any means necessary, no matter what. Basically, fuck what we feeling. Let's just get it done. And that's how we operate today for the most part. I mean, it's not too far it's not too far off of an account of us, because you can still see it in our people today. We get up, no matter how we feeling, no matter, and we get stuff done. our men and our women. You know, we take care of business. So this is the end of the first chapter. We're going to be going into the second. They have a little bit of illustrations here, you know, Indian bows, arrows, harpoons, pots, some living things, you know. So, but this is pretty much going to be going into chapter 2. You see. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this episode. We're going to be getting more into this book. It's a really extensive book, and it's very interesting, as you guys can hear. And so, you know, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, and also make sure you all like the video. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. And yeah, Tata Kista, I appreciate y'all. I cherish y'all. And we'll see y'all on the next episode. Yakoki.